The Adams-Onis Treaty. After the Louisiana Purchase was completed, explorers set out to discover exactly what had been bought. So, let's look at Western Florida. Western Florida was supposed to be included in the Louisiana Purchase, but boundaries weren't really clearly defined in the Louisiana Purchase, so it was still kind of iffy about where Western Florida stopped, where Eastern Florida stopped, where Louisiana stopped. Spain still controlled some of this area, and Spain wanted to still claim part of that area. France had sold so much of this area to the United States, but there wasn't any clearly defined boundary that said, this is part of the Louisiana Purchase and this isn't. So boundaries were still being defined during this time. The United States began to make inroads into Spanish-controlled Western Florida. And this is during that period of exploration after the Louisiana Purchase was completed. In 1810, rebels attacked Baton Rouge, and James Madison claimed that West Florida was now part of the United States. This was supposed to be part of the Louisiana Purchase, but the area had still been Spanish-controlled. Now that rebels attacked Baton Rouge, James Madison said, you know what, Western Florida is now part of the United States, and while the rebels protested, they were unable to reestablish themselves, and this is the Spanish rebels. So Spain was unable to reestablish itself in Western Florida. Thus, Western Florida was now more or less officially part of the United States. Next, let's look at Eastern Florida. By 1817, runaway slaves, Native Americans, and outlaws had been congregating in Eastern Florida and leading increasingly frequent raids on the United States. So Eastern Florida wasn't supposed to be part of the Louisiana Purchase. Eastern Florida still technically belonged to Spain. In this area, right along the border between Eastern Florida and Western Florida, which now does officially belong to the United States, you had runaway slaves, Native Americans, and outlaws that would band together either in their own groups or together they would form little alliances and they would raid the towns or cities, any kind of establishments within the United States right across that border area. And these raids became increasingly frequent. Spain's presence in this area was very limited at this time. So by this time, Spain had been unable to reestablish themselves in Western Florida. Eastern Florida was effectively cut off from the rest of Spain. It was hard to send soldiers there or people there to start colonies. So there weren't a lot of Spanish still in Eastern Florida. Instead, it had been taken over by these other unsavory groups, especially along the border between the United States and Eastern Florida. So in 1817 and 1818, Andrew Jackson led a group of soldiers into Eastern Florida to take control of the area in order to end these raids. The United States said, enough is enough. We're tired of these groups of people raiding us. Spain isn't keeping control of this area. So Andrew Jackson led a group of soldiers into Eastern Florida for the United States and took control of this area. In 1819, the Spanish reluctantly signed the Treaty of the Adams-Onis Treaty, in which the U.S. formally acquired West Florida, or East Florida. For $5 million. which Spain promptly returned to pay off some of their debt to the United States. So, John Quincy Adams and Luis de Onis signed a treaty in which the United States formally acquired East Florida for the price of $5 million. Now, the United States actually didn't have to hand over anything for this treaty because Spain owed the United States enough money that Spain immediately said, here, have the $5 million back, apply it to our debt. So the United States just scratched a little bit of Spain's debt off the books, and they acquired East Florida. So the Adams-Onis Treaty was how the United States formally acquired Eastern Florida. Western Florida was supposed to be part of the Louisiana Purchase, but it did take some effort on the United States to take control of this area. The United States took control of some of Eastern Florida and then formally enacted the Adams-Onis Treaty, which officially let the United States acquire East Florida.